Hi, good afternoon. In this class, first I will continue talk about iterations, and then I will ask you to work on lab 2. What is iteration? Iteration is a loop, that is, a code block is repeated many times. In MATLAB and in any other programming languages, such as C, C++, or Java, there are two types of iterations. One is for loop, the second one is while loop. If we know how many times of the loop we use for loop, for example, you want to print the numbers from 1 to 100, you know the loop will be repeated 100 times, so you use for loop. The second type is a while loop. If you don't know how many times of the loop, but you know the condition to maintain the loop or the condition to terminate the loop, you can use a while loop. If you know how many times of the loop, sure, you can use a while loop because you can use how many times of the condition to maintain the loop or terminate the loop. Let's see for loop. The template for a for loop is for variable equals vector, and then code block. And here, variable equals vector is not an assignment. You know, for single equal symbol, it is an assignment in computer science. But in the for loop, it is special. The single equal symbol is not assignment. Here it means the vector takes on the values in the here it means the variable takes on the values in the vector in turn. For each value, the code block is conducted. For example, the vector has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the variable will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in turn. For each number, for each variable, 1, 2, 3, 4, for each number, the code block will be repeated. The flow chart is here. The program has some other statements, and then the program enters the for loop. In the for loop, the computations are conducted, and then go back to check if there are leftover of the variable for the vector values. If there are leftover of the vector values, and then the code block continues. If the vector is done, and then the for loop is finished, the program has some other statements, and then the program will continue to work on other statements. Here is an example. The example is to find the maximum number in a vector. So how do you find a maximum number in a vector? Before you write your program, you need to come up with your algorithm first. What is algorithm? Algorithm is the approach, the strategy, the scheme, the way to solve something. You have a vector. How do you find the maximum number? If you don't use a computer, if you find the maximum number by mental calculation, so first one, you see the first number, and then you save the first number in your mind. And then you look at the second number, you compare the second number with the first number. If the second number is bigger, you replace the temporary maximum number kept in your mind with the second number. If the second number is smaller, you don't have to change anything. And then you see the third number. You compare the third number with the temporary maximum number kept in your mind. If the number is bigger, you replace the number. Otherwise, you don't do anything. So this is the algorithm. You check the number in turn. For each number, you compare the number with the temporary maximum number in your mind. And finally, the number kept in your mind is the maximum number. If you write a program, you can assign the first number A1 to a temporary maximum number. The variable the max is a temporary maximum number. At first, you set the initial max value with a of 1. And then you use a for loop. The for loop is for x equals a. For x equals a means x takes on 6, 12, 6, 91, 13, and 6 in turn. So for each x, what is the contents of the for loop? The content is the body of the for loop. The content is if x is greater than the max, and then x is assigned to the max. So in each step, we compare x with the temporary maximum value. If x is bigger, and then the max is replaced with x. If x is smaller, we do not do anything. So this is the body of the for loop. X equals a. X takes on the elements in A one by one. When x reaches the last 6, we compare 6 with the temporary maximum number and then end the for loop. Once the for loop is finished, the max is a global maximum number. In this question, it is 91. The last statement is to output the maximum number. We learned 3 output approaches. One is you type the variable's name without semicolon. This is to display the value of the variable. Second one is to use DISP. The third one is to use fprintf. In this question, we display max A is, and then percent sign D. That means we want to display the result with an integer value, and then \n. This is to start a new line. So this is the first example to use a for loop to find the maximum number in a vector. Let's see the example in MATLAB. In MATLAB, first one, this is A, and then A1 is assigned to the max, and then use a for loop to iterate through A. X takes on each number in A in turn. We compare x with the max. If x is greater, and then we update the max with x. Otherwise, we do not do anything. Once the for loop is finished, the maximum number is the max. You see, if and then there is an end. For there is an end. In MATLAB, we use the reserved keywords such as if, switch, for, while, and end to end a code block. Let's run the program. We run the program, we see A equals 6, 12, 6, 91, 13, 6. And then max A is 91. So this is the first example. Let's see one more example. In this example, we want to find the maximum value of a vector, but we not only find the maximum value, but also find its index. In many programs, we find the maximum value or the minimum value. We also want to find its index. Now, for example, I have the scores of all the students. Each student has an ID So I want to find the maximum score and the student's ID. This example, A equals floor rand 110 times 100. So first, we use rand function to create 10 random numbers. They are between 0 and 100, and the floor, so they are between 0 and 99. We use the same idea. We assign A1 to the max, and we assign 1 to the index. So the index will be the variable to save the index. And then we use a for loop. This time, we don't use for x equals a. We use for index equals 1 colon length of a. So index here is a loop variable. The loop variable index will be 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 10 in this question. We use index as the loop variable because we want to save the index. For each index, x equals a index, and then we compare x with the max. If x is greater than the max, and then we assign x to the max. At the same time, we assign index to the index. So if x is bigger than the max, we replace the max with the current x. At the same time, we replace the index with the current index. So we save the maximum number x and the corresponding index. It is index. End. This end is end if. And then end. This is end for. After the for loop, the max saves the maximum number. The index saves the index with the maximum number. And then print the max value in A is parent sign D I parent sign D backslash n the max comma the index. In the output, we want to output two values. One is the maximum value, the second one is the corresponding index. So we use parent sign D two times, and then the two variables, the max comma the index. Let's see the program in MATLAB. This is a program. In the program, the first one, we use rand and then floor to create a random vector. I emphasize that rand is very important. I give you the general equation to create the random numbers, n random numbers between A and B. You create n random numbers between A and B, and then you can use floor, seal, or round to create all integer numbers. In computer science, if you just want to test an algorithm, normally you can use the integer numbers. You don't have to use floating numbers. If you want to do some calculation based on the requirements, you probably need to use floating numbers. So floating number or integer number depends on the requirements of the question. In this question, assign A1 to the max, assign 1 to the index, and then use a for loop. For index equals 1 colon length of A. The increment is 1. So the standard format is 1 colon increment colon length of A, but here the increment is 1, so we ignore the increment. X equals A index, so X is the current number, A index, and then we compare X with the max. If X is bigger than the max, and then we replace the max with X, and we assign index to the index. And then we output the result. Okay, let me run the program. A is such a vector, and then the maximum value in A is 97 at 2. I run it again. A is such a vector. The max value in A is 93 at 4. So this is the second program of for loop. from the two programs, you see the first one for loop is for x equals a. So x is a loop index, and x is the element, is the value of the number in a. Second question, for index equals 1 colon length of a. Index is the index. It is not the element, not the value. So normally in MATLAB, we have the two ways to use the loop index. One is to use the number. Second one is to use the index. So which methods you will be used in your program, it depends on your particular program. Okay, so this is a for loop. Next one is a while loop. In while loop, the code block will be repeated as long as the logical expression returns true. So if we don't know how many times of the loop, but we know the condition to maintain the loop, or we know the condition to terminate the loop, we use a while loop. If we know how many times, as I said, of course, we can use a while loop. We can use how many times as a condition to control the loop. But normally, if we know how many times, we use a for loop. The while loop has the templates like this. First one, initialization, and then while logical expression, and then execute code block, and then end. So the template looks more complex than the templates of for loop. Yes, while loop is more complex. Before while loop, you need to initialize the loop index, or we call the loop variable. And then inside the while loop, you need to make some changes to enable the loop to terminate. Otherwise, the loop will go to an infinite loop. So, for example, if there are some common mistakes, for example, if you use while I is less than 100, and then sum equals sum plus I, you want to compute the, you want to calculate the sum from 1 to 100. So that is, you want to add up 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 100. If you write your program like this, while I is less than or equal to 100, sum equals sum plus I, because you don't. So what is the mistake of this question? So first one, you don't assign any number to I. That is, you don't initialize I. So while I is less than or equal to 100, I is empty. There's no value to I. So you will miss the error message. So you need to initialize I at first. I is assigned as 1. So this is the first mistake. I fixed the mistake. Second one, inside the while loop, while I is less than or equal to 100, sum equals sum plus I. So what is the value of I? I is 1. I is always 1. So while I is less than or equal to 100 is always true. And then the while loop will repeat forever. So we need to update I. Sum equals sum plus I, and then I equals I plus 1. So I will be 1 at first, and then 2, 3, 4, and finally I is 100. So for each I, we add I to sum, and the last I is 100, and then I equals I plus 1, I is 101. When I is 101, while I is less than or equal to 100, this one is false. So the while loop is terminated. So it is important to initialize the loop variable before while loop and make some changes to enable the loop to terminate. Otherwise, you will go into the while loop, the infinite loop. This is a flowchart of while loop. Before the while loop, There is the initialization, and then in the while loop, we check the Boolean expression, that is the logical expression. If the logical expression is true, the computations are conducted. The computations are the code block. If the Boolean expression is false, we terminate the while loop and execute other statements in the program. Here is an example. We use a while loop to find the maximum value and the corresponding index in a vector. First one, create A. A equals the floor round 1, 10 times 100. The idea of this program is the same as the idea of the for loop. We use a different representation, that is, we use a different programming skills. We use a while loop. First one, assign A1 to the max, assign 1 to the index. And then initialize index with 1. And then in the while loop, while index is less than or equal to length of A. So this is a condition. While index is less than or equal to length of A, when the index value is less than index or equal to length of A, the while loop will be repeated. The while loop will continue. X equals A index, so we assign the first value to X. And when the while loop continues, X will be A of 2, A of 3, A of 4 to A of n. Here n is 10 in this question. So in each step, A index is assigned to A. A index is assigned to X. So A1, A2, A3, A4 up to A10 will be assigned to X. When A index is assigned to X, we compare X with the max. If X is bigger than the max, assign X to the max and assign index to the index. End. So this end is to end if. Inside the while loop, we need to update index. So index equals index plus 1. If we don't update index, the index is always less than length of A, and the while loop will be an infinite loop. And the end, this is to end the while loop. And then display the max value in A is parenthesis sign D as parenthesis sign D backslash M, the max, the index. Let's see the example in MATLAB. In MATLAB, first one creates A and then assign A1 to the max, 1 to the index. And then assign 1 to index. This is to initialize the loop variable index. The condition to maintain the while loop is while index is less than or equal to length of A. And then each time assign A index to X, and then compare X with the max. And then update the max, the index, if X is bigger, or if X is smaller or equal to the max, we ignore the statement here. And each time we update index. And finally, display the result. So let's run the program. And when we run the program, we create such a vector A, and then the max value in A is 95 at index 9. If we run it again, the max value in A is 79 at 4. We run it again. The max value in A is 95 at 7. Run it again. So we get the different values. This is an example to use a while loop to find the maximum value. So let's see one more example about the while loop. In this while loop, the user is asked to type a radius, and then based on the radius, the program computes the circumference of the circle and the area of the circle. And then the user is required to retype a radius. So the user continues to type the radius. For each radius, compute the circumference and the area. If the user wants to terminate the input, the user type a negative number or 0, and then the while loop terminates. The condition to maintain the while loop is the radius is greater than 0. So before the while loop, you see assign 1 to R. So this 1 is assigned to R is to make sure the program can go into the while loop because the while loop is while R is greater than 0. The first time, okay, you go into the while loop, you need to ask for the input. So that input is a real radius, and you will use that radius to compute the circumference and the area of the circle. The first R equals 1, this is just assign a positive value to make sure you go into the while loop. You can assign 2, 3, 10 to R because this R is not used for real computation. While R is greater than 0, and then R equals input, please enter a radius. The user is asked to type a radius. If R is greater than 0, so we need to check R again because if the user accidentally type a negative number, we cannot use a negative number to compute the two values of the circle. If R is greater than 0, area equals pi times R squared. And then circumference, circum equals 2 times pi times R. And then f print of area equals parent sign f because area is a floating number. So the output format is f. F is floating. Circum is parent sign f and then backslash n. Circum is also floating. And output area, comma, circum, end. So this end is end for if. End, that end is end for R. Let's see the program in MATLAB. In MATLAB, 1 assigned to R. So this is to guarantee we can go into the while loop. Now in the while loop, the condition is while R is bigger than 0. So how do we terminate the while loop? If we type 0 or a negative number, and then we terminate the while loop. R equals input enter radius. If R is bigger than 0, compute area, circumference, and then display the two values. End, this end for if, end, this for while. As I said, a while loop should have an initialization and an update in the while loop. So what is initialization? So here, R is assigned with 1 is the initialization. What is update? Update is ask for the input. So if you input a positive number and then you continue to compute area and circumference. If you type 0 or negative number, you terminate the while loop. Okay, let's rerun the program. Run enter radius. If I have 3 and then area equals 28 something, circum equals 18 something, and then you see the prompt message again, enter radius, enter 2, and then area equals 12 something, circum equals 12 something. If I enter negative 5 and then terminates the program. So this is one more program for while loop.